You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Navigating Life with Vision Loss. I'm your host, Kim Wardlow. This program is brought to you by the Audio Information Network of Colorado for one more month, and then we're changing our name in January to AfterSight. So I'm just trying to remind folks of that so you're prepared. And also, today is Colorado Gives Day. So it's not too late to make your donations to Audio Information Network or any other nonprofits that you may enjoy supporting. Everybody gets a little additional boost from First Bank based on the donations we receive. So Colorado Gives Day all day today. So thank you for participating in that. And then today, being in December, we're getting ready for all of the year-end holidays. And so we'll be talking about that with our guest, Ed Henkler, who is the blind guide. So Ed, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's looking forward to our conversation.
So do you have a favorite holiday tradition in your family?
I would have to say my wife has been very good about making all of the holidays magical. So it isn't specific to Christmas or any of the other holidays that we've been enjoying, but each one has its own special things. And even something like Halloween, we had a certain stew that we would always have when the girls were growing up. And then we would have what they called their boo cups, where they had a plastic cup with a couple black eyes and black mouth on it. And now that we have grandkids, our older daughter is doing the same with her children, our grandchildren. So traditions have been very important, and I love every holiday for different reasons.
Yes. Oh, that's so fun. And it's great that she's continuing that on with the grandkids.
They actually get discouraged with us when we forget to do that.
Oh, no.
Now that we don't have any kids at home.
The pressure's on.
Yep.
Well, Ed, I have to say I was so impressed. I went to your website, theblindguide.com, and you have so much information, both for individuals who have lost or are losing vision, for friends, family, caregivers, employers. It covers so many aspects of vision loss. And how did you get started doing this?
So it all starts with my mom, and quite a long time ago. I'm an only child by way of background, and my dad had died relatively early. He was 63, so maybe for some people that's not that early, but it was a lot earlier than I planned on.
Sure.
My grandparents were all in their late 80s, early 90s. My mom moved down to Florida after my dad died, and somewhere along the way, it was probably the early 1980s, she called me up one day and she said, "I have macular degeneration." And I said, "I don't have any idea what that means. Degeneration doesn't sound good, but I don't know beyond that." So she explained what she had, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are very familiar with it, but at the time I wasn't. There were no treatments when she was losing her sight, back in the 1990s. So what they did back then is they did kind of a laser cauterization. So they'd stop the leaking blood vessels, retinal vessels, but that was it. So she lost her sight very quickly in one eye. As we talked with her, we felt that she'd be okay to stay down in Florida alone. And she actually kept working. But we knew it had happened so quickly that when it happened again, we'd have to move quickly ourselves to get her relocated. So we were in the Philadelphia suburbs at the time. And again, she was Florida, Fort Myers. And when she called that second time, it was 5 years later, but she called and she said, "It's now started in the other eye." Within a week, we had moved her, mainly because we knew we were just going to have to move that fast. Got her up to where we lived, put her in an apartment about 5 minutes away so that she could have some level of independence, as could we, but she'd be very close to us. And a whole different world back then. No internet, at least the internet was around, but not in the form that we understand it today. but we found a brochure for the Montgomery County Association for the Blind. Reached out to them, and they restored my mom's independence. That's not to trivialize it. It actually took a long time, but they taught her all the skills. They went into her apartment. They made it safe, taught her how to cook again, taught her how orientation, mobility, all those things, and transformed her life. She ended up traveling outside the country for the first time in her life, and it was after she had lost her sight.
Wow.
She used to take SEPTA, that's the Philly Rapid Transit. She'd take that all over the place. She used to go down to something called the Flower Show, and if any of your listeners are familiar with the Flower Show in Philadelphia, it's a madhouse. It is just packed with people, and she'd go down there on her own. And I used to get a question, don't you worry about her? And my answer was always, yeah, I worry that something could happen, but there are two choices. My wife and I can't really take her all over. So she can either sit safely in her apartment or go out and whatever happens, happens. And I would always say to people, I would rather she was, this will sound wrong, but want to go through the whole thing. I'd rather that she was struck by a car doing things she wanted to do than sitting, again, safely in her apartment. I did acknowledge I'd feel terrible for the person who was driving the car because nothing I could say would ever make them feel all right. But just from my mom's perspective, we didn't want her locked in. We wanted her to have the freedom to go out.
Yeah, just really a chance to continue to live her life.
Absolutely.
So you were just in those beginning stages of learning yourself about really being a caregiver and how to be able to give that independence. I applaud you for that. I think that can be so difficult for folks, but I think it's so important for the person to be not only allowed, but encouraged to be independent.
Absolutely. I'll come back to that in a second. I just kind of finishing the tale. I ended up, that's where the passion for blindness came, or for helping people thrive with blindness, because I watched my mom do it. I know it was very difficult. I also know it was possible, and I watched her do it. So I was with Merck, a pharmaceutical company at the time. We were encouraged to give back to the community, so I joined that Association for the Blind board. I was with the board for 13 years, really until we relocated to our current home. And I was board president for a while. I got involved with technology for the blind after an early retirement from Merck, an unplanned early retirement. But I found myself looking for something to do, and I got very involved in assistive technology with a startup out of the University of Pennsylvania, and then subsequently with worldwide companies, startups developing technology for the blind. So a lot of passion around the space about creating employment opportunities. But if you come back to that caregiver role that you talked about, there are really two elements for it. One is this idea of thriving with blindness. And I always distinguish that from surviving. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people can survive. They're the ones that sit in their apartment or house or don't do anything, either out of fear or lack of knowledge, lack of whatever, lack of support. That's surviving. Obviously, you're still alive, but you're not thriving. And I was particularly struck, one of the meetings that I attended with my mom, because a lot of times I'd go to the support groups with the Association for the Blind, and I heard somebody say something that's so obvious, and yet it wasn't even in my thinking at the time. We were teaching these people, well, it was a blind support group, so everybody in there was blind, just trying to help them understand what to do. There were caregivers such as myself in the audience also. And one person said, I don't want to hang around with a bunch of blind people. I want to hang around with the friends I had before I lost my sight and do the things I did then. And that's the thing. That's obvious. Why would we think suddenly because I can't see, I don't want my original network of friends? I want to just hang with other people that are blind. You need their support and understanding, but you don't want to be limited. Going back to their caregiver, though, when my mom first moved up, we were what I would call caretakers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a role you have to have when somebody's going through vision loss. Really no choice there. The person's helpless initially. And I don't think it matters how capable you are, how gregarious you are. Your world has just changed in a dramatic way, particularly if it's a sudden or relatively rapid loss as it was with my mom. You just don't know how to do anything. At that point, you need somebody keeping you safe, getting you to appointments, figuring out what needs to be fixed in your house, all those things. That's a caretaker role, and it's a critical one. At some point, though, you need to shift, and that's where you shift from caretaker to caregiver. Somebody who's going to be there to support, but also to push when they should, to keep you safe, but not necessarily grab your arm the moment you think that the person's in danger. It's really that idea of becoming closer to a friend as opposed to maybe it's a parent, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's critical. The person who is losing their sight generally wants to have that shift in role. There are certainly people that may want to continue having constant support, but I think most people want to get back to what they were doing. So they want to be allowed to go free. But for the caretaker or caregiver, there's that element I talked about with my mom. I'm letting them go. And I know that they're probably going to do some things that aren't as safe as they could be, particularly when they're initially learning, and particularly when you're going out into traffic and that type of thing. But you want the person to thrive, and the only way to thrive is to let them go to do that. And maybe maybe it's not the last thought, but caregiving is a very challenging role. Particularly, I know some people where it's the spouse who lost their sight. Everything about their world is now shifted. The things they planned to do as they got older aren't going to work the same way anymore. The support system they had isn't going to work. And I think the hardest part is for the caregiver, well, nothing changed for you. So people are likely to say, well, why are you feeling sorry for yourself? It's your spouse that lost their sight. Well, yeah, you lost the spouse that you had originally too. And it's not that they can't recover. It's just it's a big transition. So this idea, caretaking is the most demanding role. Caregiving is less so. And the more you can help the person become independent, the more that reduces further to being less of a task for you.
Did you see that with your mom? You talked about how relationships can change, like within your family, and wanting to still maintain your network of friends, although you may have a new network of friends who share vision loss with you and some of those struggles, but you still have all the friends that you had before. Did you see those relationships change or be strained as folks were trying to figure out how to react or interact with your mom once she started to lose vision?
Interesting question. I can't say that I have any specific examples of a change in the relationship we had with people or she had with people. The things that come to mind are more trivial. People that knew her and even people that didn't know her would want to help her. Mm-hmm. And the way they would typically help her was by doing exactly the wrong thing, which is, say, grabbing their arm
right.
to help her find a place as opposed to letting her grab their arm. I'm going to view that as relatively trivial. I think the changes between my mom and I were probably more significant, but it's important. Mm-hmm. And it's important for anybody interacting, not just with somebody who's blind, but with anybody. I was going to say anybody with disabilities, but maybe it's with anybody. We're quick to offer people help that they may not want, or to offer help in ways that the person doesn't want. The example I was giving is one of the classic ones where somebody sees that person who's blind, they're worried about them, they grab their arm to steer right. them across the road, and that's frightening to the person. They don't know what's happening. Now they're being pushed. They don't know if they're at risk. They haven't had a time to assess whether they should even be crossing the road. But then the other side of that reaction is my mom would get irritated with them. Mm-hmm. And she would sometimes just get furious. And she'd say, I've told this person 3 times already. I don't know why they keep doing that. I said, they just want to help you. And you've got to find a balance. You need to explain to them why what they're doing isn't helpful, while recognizing that you do need their help and you don't want to alienate them. So I think that was a tough transition for her. And I'm sure it is for just about anybody, that idea of finding the right way. There's a great book that was written by a Supreme Court Justice, Sonia Sotomayor, which is called Just Ask. And it's the answer to how do you interact with somebody with disabilities, not just blindness, but a disability. And it's to go up and just ask, how can I help you? Do you need any help? That type of question, as opposed to assuming that you know what they need or assuming how it should be given. And that just ask is just the simplest way to go about it. Ask them how you can help. If I switch the relationship with my mom, it happened a little bit when my dad died, where I started feeling like I was somewhere between the spouse and the parent as opposed to the kid, which wasn't necessarily a transition that I liked. but we worked through that. But then when she lost her sight, her initial reaction was to kind of turn everything over to me. I can't do that. I need you to do that for me. And when I was a caretaker, I did things for her. As I switched into caregiver, I started pushing her. And she would say something like, "Can you call this person for me?" I said, I can, but so can you. And why don't you call them? "No, I really don't like to have to call somebody I don't know." I said, "Well, I don't either. So you need to do that." And one of the things that I found, this was somewhat unexpected, but I found when she asked me to do things that she could do herself, or at least that I judged she could do herself, I'd get irritated. Maybe that's a little irrational, but I'd get irritated, almost to the point of anger. When she'd ask me to do something else, even if it was harder, but I knew she couldn't do it, it didn't even cross my mind. I went and I did it. So that kind of became my filter for, if this isn't bothering me, then she probably can't do it, and I don't expect her to. If it's irritating me, now's when I, in a nice way, need to push back and say, "No, you can do that." She stayed with us for a while during some other medical treatments. And she would say, "I'm ready for lunch now." And I'd say, "Great, I'll get it out of the freezer." "Well, can you put it in the microwave?" I said, "No, you can. I just won't do it." So it got into kind of a weird role there, where you're trying to push the person in the right way to do the things they're capable of doing for both of your sanity. So they can become independent again, and so you don't become so overwhelmed with the demands that are putting on them. I give one other example, and maybe we'll want to come back to this later, but as with so many people when they're losing their sight, she did not want to use a white cane. And if anybody doesn't know this that's on the call, the macular degeneration eliminates your central vision. You still keep peripheral vision, so you have a reasonable degree of vision still. You just can't see what's directly in front of you. She would push back and say, I can see enough. I don't need to use the cane. I said, "The cane's not for you. It's for the other people." And she didn't understand that. And I say, if you don't have that cane, people think you're sighted, because some people who've lost their sight, it's very obvious they don't have sight. In other cases, there's absolutely no indication whatsoever they can't see. And I said, without that cane, people think you can see. And when you do something they don't expect, they're just not prepared for it. They see that white cane, it tells them that you're blind, or at least visually impaired, and they're going to interact differently. And before I switch back over to you again, there was a really interesting story. It was a very close friend of mine, and this is not a vision issue. He had a Parkinson's-like neurodegenerative disease. And he would freeze sometimes when he was doing things. And we couldn't get him to use a cane. We kept saying, "You need to use a cane, because that'll advertise once again to people that something's not right, whatever it may be." We were going into a restaurant, and he was at the door. Some people were coming out, and he froze. And he's standing there. He couldn't speak, and he wasn't moving. And the two people are looking at him because he looked normal. And they're looking at him and saying, "Well, come on, move. Hey, dude, what's wrong with you? Why are you standing there?" Meanwhile, he's staring at them, probably looking belligerent, although he wasn't, but he couldn't do anything. And that's what finally got him to use a cane. We said, "You could have gotten into a fight there." They really thought you were being a jerk, just standing there at the door. If you had a cane, they might not have known what was wrong, but they would have understood something was wrong. They would have interacted with you differently. And after that, he always used the cane. But it's not always about what you need. Sometimes it's about helping others understand what you can and can't do.
Well, as we're getting near the holidays, all the various end-of-year holidays, frequently people get together with their families, with their friends. For some individuals, this may be the first time they've seen family members or friends since they've lost vision, or perhaps, as can happen, like with your mom, you lose some vision, but then you lose more later on and things change. I know you have a great holiday gift guide on your website. Are there other resources that you can recommend to folks as they're getting together for holidays, or like with the gift guide, perhaps for a friend or family member who wants to purchase a gift that might be helpful to a friend or loved one who's lost vision?
Before I answer the question, you just made me think of one other thing. Let's say you're at a family gathering. It's the first time people have come across that person who no longer sees. If the setting is right, it probably makes sense to just explain to people, hey, mom has lost a lot of her vision. Here are a couple, she's happy to be here. She wants to see all of you. Keep in mind, she can't really see your face. So you might want to initially go up and just say, hey, it's Ed. Hey, it's Kim, whatever it is, just so she knows. Probably knows your voice, but if it's in a crowded room, maybe she won't.
Right.
She's not going to eat food the way you do anymore. So if it looks a little bit sloppy, that's just the way it is. Or maybe you can help her get some things that she eat, that type of thing, just kind of coaching people, or even doing it in a humorous way. One of the things, as much as I understood what was going on with her vision, what she could and couldn't do, it used to drive me nuts that she would tell me she couldn't see me. She'd have to see me from a great distance to know who I was, and only then by looking at the clothes I was wearing, because she could not see my face. And then I'm standing there talking to her, and she'll say, hey, is that a dime down there on the floor? And I just throw my hands up, like, how can you see it? And I knew how she could, but it didn't matter. It's like, well, how could you see that dime? You can't see my face.
Yeah, the peripheral vision really throws people.
It's weird, and it's different for every one person. It's like not like you just learn one person and how they interact. As far as the gift guide, I'm involved with a lot of different assistive technologies I mentioned earlier, so I'm always trying to profile new things, and you'll see that both in the gift guide, and you'll also see it on my site. But I think one of the things we tend to do wrong, at least in my family, we've always viewed Christmas and birthdays really as opportunities to give you something that you really don't need, something you'd like, but you absolutely don't need. Assistive technology, to some degree, is something you need, so it doesn't quite fit in there. So what I recommend to people, and you'll see this in the gift guide because I have a couple of adult beverage options as well as assistive technology. What I would say is, and it's kind of spelled out in the post that I wrote back then, is this idea, if the person says, boy, I really wish I had some bit of technology. Oh, well, you should get it. It's just too expensive. I can't spend that amount of money. Well, there's your gift. It's something they desperately want. Get it. I will throw in, before I give some other suggestions, try it before you buy it if you possibly can. Maybe take them to an association for the blind or something, let them try it, because everybody has different tech skills. Everybody has different vision loss. And what's great for somebody may not be great for somebody else. So if you can possibly try it before you buy it, you should do that. But they've given you a great answer by telling you that. Another thing you can do is just take them somewhere. The gift of time. It doesn't have to be the gift of money. And maybe you take them out to a meal, or you take them to a ball game or something like that, or take them to a concert. That's, for somebody who's blind, that may be more valuable than a new article of clothing or something they don't want. And everybody, again, is going to be different there. But I remember my mom at one point said, we were in Philadelphia at the time. She was a big Philly sports fan. She said, I want to go see a Phillies game. I looked at her and said, come on. You're not going to be able to see a thing. Why would you want to do that? I hope I said it better, but I probably didn't. So we went back and forth, and I finally said, fine, we'll go to the game. So I ended up grabbing one of my friends just to kind of help a little bit with managing logistics and everything. We went down to the Phillies ballpark. We had a little tailgater beforehand, which I typically associate more with football, but we had it for the baseball game, had a martini for her, which she loved. And as we're walking into the stadium, I thought, I know why she wanted to be here. Because at that point, you start getting assaulted by the smells, the crowd noise, just the energy, the excitement that's in there. Even though she couldn't see much of the game, it was the rest of that experience. That's what she wanted. So the gift of time, I found with my mom, if I was helping her with chores, That's what it felt like. It was a chore. It's kind of a pain in the neck. I hated doing it. I couldn't wait until the time was done. Somewhere along the way, I switched to bringing her lunch or going to a concert or doing things like that, and it shifted everything in my mind. Now I was having fun with my mom, as I would have when she was sighted. The other, it was just a burden. And I know not everybody will view it that way, but for me, that's what it felt like. One was a burden. The other was time spent enjoying my mom's company. So I think the gift of time may be as valuable as anything it can offer. And then, as I mentioned, some of it's about something that has nothing to do with being blind. It's a cocktail smoke because that person loves cocktails, and now they can do something special. Maybe that's not a great example because maybe they'll burn themselves, but you can always smoke the cocktail for them. And actually, you could learn to use it. So it's that idea, don't feel... Yeah, I'm going to go off on a segue. There's a great movie that was put out a while ago called Crip Camp that was about the spur of the moment. I can't think of the person's name. Oh, Judy Newman. And she had cerebral palsy. And Crip Camp was a movie that was put out about these kids, I think in the 60s, all of whom had disabilities. And they went to this camp. And you know what they did in the camp? They were finding ways to sneak out at night to hook up with other campers. They were trying to find a way to sneak some beer or another drink. In other words, they were doing exactly what somebody who's sighted or without disabilities would do. It's such an important lesson because even though I think I'm savvy in this space, when I read it, it's like, wow, I didn't even think about that. And why not? I mean, just because I have disabilities doesn't mean I don't want to drink, or it doesn't mean I don't want to date somebody. But I think we tend to see people that way. Oh, they're in a wheelchair. What could they possibly... Dating is not going to matter anymore. Well, no, it's the human spirit. Everything that person without disabilities wants to do, same for the other. So it's a great movie because I think it just reminds you that the only difference is they have an impairment, say a mobility impairment. Their mind, their desires, their passions are completely unchanged. And the more we can help them enjoy those, back to the gift guide, the more you're doing something really helpful for them. Let them thrive. Let them enjoy their life.
Right. Well, and just like they'll still want to socialize with the friends that they've always had. They'll still want to do the hobbies and the activities that they did. I think it is so easy to become so focused on the disability, the vision loss, especially when it's such a big change in somebody's life, to be so focused on that we forget that they're still a full, whole, complex person, and they just happen to have some vision loss. Right. But it's not what defines them. And remembering to still help them do all the things that they've always loved to do.
It's pretty astounding to me, but I know people who are blind who are architects, which to me is a very visual task. I know Paralympians who've lost their sight suddenly and then have gone out and set world records. I know people that do almost every sport that's out there has been adapted for people with disabilities, including blindness. There's really almost nothing you can't do. I always throw out the example of neurosurgery, where I really don't want somebody who's blind doing neurosurgery. But if you look at robotic surgery, at some point, I don't even think it's double-digit years. It could be the next 5, 8, 10 years. I think you'll be able to do robotic surgery even if you're blind. I think the combination of things that we're learning, artificial intelligence, all those things. So it has to be done differently. That's the thing to remember. But to think that you can't do it's probably not true. You see people playing soccer, playing baseball. They do a lot of things where they put a sound generating device within that.
Right.
I love golf. You think about how many people lose the golf balls. You get that ball adapted, which hasn't happened yet, but get the ball adapted with some sort of a tracking device, which could be tracked on a phone app. The person who's blind may be telling the person who's sighted where their ball is. So it's a matter of being creative as opposed to thinking it's impossible.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to this incredible episode of Navigating Life with Vision Loss. We hope you had a wonderful time and a wonderful Thanksgiving. As we're diving into the month of December, please remember that today is the last day for Colorado Gives, but don't let that discourage you because you can donate any time of the year to any nonprofit, and we would appreciate your dollars because it affords us to do things like this program, along with adding new programs in the future. So make sure you get those dollars in. And again, thank you so much for that. If you have any comments or questions, please send us an email at feedback@aincolorado.org, or you can shoot us a voicemail on our new voicemail line at 720-712-8856. We hope you've had a fantastic week and look forward to being with you all December long. So keep it right here on Navigating Life with Vision Loss. Make sure you like and subscribe and add a comment as it helps us push this content out to anybody who may need it. Share it with friends and family. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great week.